Okay. I'd like to call this meeting of your Newark City Council to order. Autumn, please call the roll.
Mr. Lang.
Present.
Mr. Marmee.
Present.
Mr. Rath.
Here.
Mr. Blake.
Here.
Mr. Bub.
Here.
Mr. Cost.
Here.
Mr. Fennell.
Here.
Mr. Frazier.
Here.
Ms. Hall.
Here.
And Mr. Labutus.
Present. We have everyone here or present this evening. Will you please rise for the invocation by Mr. Blake, and then join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Blake.
You bow your heads. Heavenly Father, we welcome you in this space. Think of us as we make decisions on behalf of the citizens of Newark. Think of our students as they return to school tomorrow and Wednesday. Think of their safety. Think of the safety of the teachers and the staff, and give blessings to Newark City Schools and the students and staff there. May you guide us all in that we do tonight and in the future, and give us strength and guidance. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Blake. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Great to see you.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda this evening, we have caucus. That's the time for council to discuss anything pertaining to the agenda tonight. We do have 4 items on here that we need to use Rule 11 for. These are time-sensitive items. Rule 11 is when the majority and minority leader agree that we can hear these without going through committee. Mr. Cost and Mr. Marmee, is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. Let's just go ahead and vote on these now. We'll do ordinance number 18-26.
Ordinance 18-26 by Mr. Labutus and Mr. Lang, an ordinance consenting to the annexation of certain territory generally described as being approximately 0.53 acres, more or less, located in Newton Township to the city of Newark, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
18-26 is on the first reading, but it is an emergency. What is your wish?
Mr. President, make a motion to adopt 18-26.
Motion by Mr. Rath, second by Mr. Cost. Is there any discussion on 18-26?
Yeah, this is a piece of legislation that was rewritten due to a clerical error on the county's part. That's why we're doing an emergency to get it through fast.
Mr. Rath, anyone else? Autumn, please call the roll to vote.
Mr. Lang.
Yes.
Mr. Marmee.
Yes.
Mr. Rath.
Yes.
Mr. Blake.
Yes.
Mr. Bub.
Yes.
Mr. Cost.
Yes.
Mr. Fennell.
Yes.
Mr. Frazier.
Yes.
Ms. Hall.
Yes.
And Mr. Labutus.
Yes. 18-26 passes 10-0. 18-27 is an ordinance objecting to the annexation. Since we just passed this, we're going to go ahead and have Autumn read it, and it will die for lack of a motion.
Ordinance 18-27 by Mr. Labutus and Mr. Lang, an ordinance objecting to the annexation of certain territory generally described as being 0.53 acres, more or less, located in Newton Township to the city of Newark, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
Is there a motion? Okay, that does not pass. That dies for lack of a motion. Next, we move on to 18-68.
Resolution 18-68 by Mr. Labutus and Mr. Lang, a resolution adopting a statement indicating what services, if any, the city of Newark, Ohio will provide for approximately 0.53 acres, more or less, located in Newton Township, a territory proposed for expedited to annexation, and declaring an emergency.
You've heard the first reading of 18-68. It is an emergency. What is your wish?
Mr. President,
Mr. Rath?
I'd like to make a motion to adopt 18-68.
Motion by Mr. Rath, second by Mr. Koth. Is there any discussion on 18-68?
Mr. President,
Mr. Rath?
1868 and 1869 have the emergency clause for the same reason as 1826.
Thank you. Anyone else? Autumn, please call the roll vote.
Mr. Lang.
Yes.
Mr. Marmee.
Yes.
Mr. Rath.
Yes.
Mr. Blake.
Yes.
Mr. Bub.
Yes.
Mr. Cost.
Yes.
Mr. Fennell.
Yes.
Mr. Frazier.
Yes.
Ms. Hall.
Yes.
And Mr. Labutus.
18-68 passes 10-0. And finally, under caucus this evening, we have 18-69.
Resolution 18-69 by Mr. Labutus and Mr. Lang, a resolution regarding a buffer zone for the annexation of approximately 0.53 acres, more or less, located in Newton Township to the city of Newark, and declaring an emergency.
Once again, 18-69 is on the first reading. It is an emergency. What is your wish?
Mr. President,
Mr. Rath.
make a motion to adopt 18-69.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Rath, second by Mr. Koss. Is there any discussion on 18-69? Seeing none, Autumn, please call the roll vote.
Mr. Lang.
Yes.
Mr. Marmee.
Yes.
Mr. Rath.
Yes.
Mr. Blake.
Yes.
Mr. Bub,
Yes.
Mr. Cos,
Yes.
Mr. Fennell,
Yes.
Mr. Frazier,
Yes.
Ms. Hall,
Yes.
and Mr. Labutus.
Yes. 18-69 passes 10-0. Next, we move on to the minutes of our August 6, 2018 meeting. Is there a motion to approve it? Motion by Mr. Labutus.
Second.
Second by Mr. Frazier. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes. Next, under appointments, President Ellington is appointing Curtis Johnson to the City of Newark Assessment Equalization Board in place of previously appointed Roy Vanetta. That was my goof. I hadn't realized Mr. Vanetta had moved out of the city, so we're replacing Mr. Vanetta with Mr. Johnson. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes. Thank you. Next, under reports of standing committees, we have three, one from Finance, one from Service, and one from Rules. Without objection, those will be received and filed. Also, reports under city officials, we have one from our auditor, Stephen Johnson, the operating report for the period ending July 31st, 2018, and one from Barb Rhodes, our city tax administrator, the income tax reports for the period ending July 31st, 2018. Without objection, those will be received and filed. Under communications tonight, we have three or four. First, we're going to start with Mayor Hall with a proclamation for the Licking County River Roundup. Mayor Hall.
Thank you. Denise, would you like to join me up there? Is everybody else in your cheering crowd out here? Or? You can really, if they want to join, it's up to you. Sure, please.
We have plenty of room up here.
That's
so
right.
Come on.
Oh, I take pictures.
There you go. Good. Our annual Licking County River Roundup is right around the corner, and it does such great things in our community and throughout the county in many ways. Has a lot of good roots here in Newark, and with our heavy population as being the most populous city, it's not always a great statement, but we probably produce the most pollution in the river and around. Now, it's been better over the years, but this day of cleanup is just a phenomenal project. And as a result, Denise is here. She is the program administrator with Soil and Water Conservation District, the program administrator, and I would like to read a proclamation. Whereas it is with great pride that on Saturday, September 8th, 2018, we celebrate the 24th annual Licking County River Roundup, where citizens come together to participate in a hands-on cleanup of our Licking County waterways. Over the years, this extremely effective roundup has gained great momentum. Last year, approximately 400 volunteers and local leaders pulled over 400 tires, 5,700 pounds of trash, and over 4,000 pounds of recyclables out of our county waterways and surrounding riverbanks. In collaboration with the Licking County River Roundup event, the City of Newark encourages everyone in the community, from families and organizations to public officials and senior citizens, to work together to help keep our waterways clean and preserve our natural resources. Now, therefore, I, Jeff Hall, Mayor of the great city of Newark, do hereby proclaim Saturday, September 8th, 2018 as Licking County River Roundup Day. There you go. You go ahead and say some words. Introduce your guest here. Sure.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Mayor Hall. I've got with me today our newest presenting sponsors, or our Keep America Beautiful sponsors, from Matesic Distributing, Kelly Dyer and Matt Kinger. We have a big event planned again this year. We will have 400 or more people again this year, and we recently figured out that over the years since 1988, when River Roundup started, that we have collected 240 tons of junk and taken it out of the river. It's a pretty amazing community effort. Most communities don't collaborate and make stuff like this happen. So hats off to Newark as being the leader in starting this many years ago, and the community as a whole. And maybe you guys can share what our Keep America Beautiful program has allowed us to do this year.
Go ahead and defer that to you, since you're the
So you're going to have to talk.
Great. Yeah. So Kelly and I were in New Orleans for a SAMCOM meeting, which is Sales and Marketing for Anheuser-Busch. Anheuser-Busch and Keep America Beautiful collaborate, work together. So during this time, I became a part of the Better World Wholesaler Council Board, which is 14 different distributors across the country, 14 different states. So while we were there, they brought this up, saying this grant might be coming available. How many of you guys are interested? Well, this guy raised their hand for the Licking County River Roundup. They gave us, the initial grant was going to be for $5,000, and they turned around and gave us 10. So it was a great thing that happened there. So we're really excited to be on board this year.
Denise, if someone wants to help participate on that day, how might they do that?
So we have a registration page on eventbrite.com for River Roundup. You can choose from many different locations in Newark, from pretty much the water plant all the way down through Newark are sections that you can clean up right here in the community. We'll cover about 30 miles of river just in one day. So,
Well, I might
it's
say
pretty exciting.
not everybody has to get in the river. Not everybody has to be in a boat or a kayak. There's a lot of different opportunities to help in many ways.
Yes, we welcome all volunteers.
Leave some of these too.
I will leave some of those.
John
brochures.
Shiryu is here with our stormwater department certainly too, and we collaborate with that as a city. That is very important to us.
Mm-hmm.
Very good.
Yes.
Thank you very
Once
much.
again, would you give us the date?
I'll see what
Thank you. Thank you very much to Matessic for being a big
Once
partner.
again, would you look at the camera back there and tell us the date and time?
This direction?
Yeah.
Licking County River Roundup is September 8th. It will start between 8 and 9 a.m. at many different locations through the county. You can register at eventbrite.com.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, certainly a lot of stuff to get out of the river, so thank you. Are you done, Ken? Okay. Next, we have a communication from Law Director Sassen that we need to vote on, asking council to accept and confirm the date of September 18, 2018 at 5 p.m. to hear the objections received regarding the Fairway Estates Sewer Assessment Program. Mr. Bubb, did you want to abstain?
Yes.
Mr. Bubb will be abstaining. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. That's 9 yes and 1 abstain. Next, under communications, we have Jody Wills, an email to council regarding disappointment in Spencer House, the Ohio Division of Liquor Control, transfer application from Rockabilly's Saloon to Local Burger Boys LLC at 606 West Church, and one from Russ Griffin asking us to approve his quick transfer of the liquor license. Without objection, those will be received and filed. Next, under communications, we have comments from citizens. There are 2 places for comments from citizens. One is now and one is after the legislation. This is not a debate with council. This is just your opportunity to come up and be heard. If you'll just give us your name and address for the record. If anyone would like to speak, if you please raise your hand so I know how many is going to speak, and we'll have you come up. Ma'am?
Hi, I'm Carolyn Cook, 898 Lake Glow Court, Newark, Ohio. Ohio has the 16th highest ridership for public transit in the nation, but Ohio spends less than 44 other states for public transportation. Despite the fact that Licking County is one of the highest counties in terms of area, and that we have within the county the 20th largest city, Newark, we have one of the least effective public transportation systems in the state. There are several reasons for this. Within the state, 40% of the money for public transportation comes from local funds. The county and surrounding cities and villages do not provide any local funds for our public transportation system. A system funded by federal and state grants has left our system fragmented and resulted in lack of services or duplications for various populations within our community. It is time that our city, village, county, and state governments see the great importance that public transportation has for our communities. Time for this county to demand a better transportation system. As freeways and suburban expansion have placed vital community resources further and further away from central location, we have left whole communities of people isolated. Young people who have not yet gotten a driver's license or who have not been able to afford a car can find it difficult to access employment, education, and recreational activities. Senior citizens who are no longer able to drive are left stranded in their homes without a way to easily access the community that's vital to their social, emotional, physical well-being and needed health care. Those who are too poor to afford reliable transportation cannot maintain employment at low-wage jobs that don't provide for a personal vehicle. In Licking County, 36% of households are earning less than the amount needed to provide for housing, childcare, food, transportation, and health care. That's from the ALICE study. Individuals with a physical or mental disability do not have the freedom that you and I have to go to the grocery store, to church, out to eat with a friend, to a community event, or even this meeting. A ride with our public transit system takes a week or two to arrange. Major healthcare facilities and medical specialists are out of reach for those in Lincoln County who don't have their own transportation, because a lot of those are in the Columbus area. This county is only 30 miles from the largest city in the state, but we are a community isolated by our lack of well-functioning public transportation system. It adds to our employment problem, our drug problem, every problem in our community. What we've been told when we've brought this up to council members and the members of the county commission and state government is, we have no money. Other communities our size have found the money. Some have a public transit tax. I would be willing to pay a transit tax. When there's a will, there's a way. We find funding for less important services. It is just like my personal budget. You take care of the needs and then the extras. Public transportation is a need for many people in our community. I'm asking the members of this council to make our public transportation system a priority, regardless of political party. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am? Is there anyone else who would like to speak this first section? Raise your hand so I know. Okay.
Hi, Charlotte Hickox at 1586 Arlington Avenue in Columbus. I'm actually here representing the Ohio Vapor Trade Association, of which there are 2 members here in Newark. Lowell Mead is here, who owns Upright Vapor at 1285 Long Pond Road, and then Rock Scissors Vapor at 1232 North 21st Street. So just wanted to comment on the ordinance that's first up, 1822. We appreciate the work that Mr. Lang has put into it and making some changes and revisions that we've requested. Specifically, our biggest concern was making sure there was an exemption for an actual vapor store to be able to still vape in that store. A lot of our customers will come in, try out different devices, try flavors, and so having that ability to still do that in the store it just really keeps our businesses flourishing, which provides a great service to those who are trying to get off traditional cigarettes. So we appreciate all of your work on that and making that exemption. We're not opposed to the language. We understand the need for it. And that's it.
Thank you, ma'am.
So thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to ordinances on the second reading, 18-22.
Ordinance 18-22 by Mr. Lang, Mr. Koss, Mr. Rath, Mr. Frazier, an ordinance amending Chapter 1870 of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Newark, Ohio, relative to electronic smoking devices within the municipal corporation.
You've heard the second reading of 18-22. What is your wish?
Mr. President,
Mr. Labutus?
I'd like to make a motion to adopt ordinance 18-22.
Motion adopted by Mr. Labutus, second by Mr. Lang. Is there any discussion on 18-22?
Mr. President,
Mr. Lang.
I'd like to make a motion to amend 1822 to replace it with 1822A. That I'll outline in greater detail for everyone, but it's in everyone's packet.
1822A is, I believe, in your packet, and the red is the outlined version, or the changed version.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So, as Ms. Hickox mentioned, she contacted me to get in touch, really just asking that we take a look at the legislation and perhaps with an eye towards updating it to sync it up with some of the language that the FDA uses that you see nationally. So she had proposed some language. I took a look online as to how the FDA describes some of this, the devices themselves, things like that. And so I'll just walk through the changes. So the first one is that instead of using the term electronic smoking devices, we're using the electronic nicotine delivery system, or ENDS, which is how the FDA refers to them. Not really changing the definition itself. I did add a couple of additional devices to the list just to make it more clear. These are the devices that we're attempting to regulate. And again, didn't feel like electronic smoking devices really made sense, given that you're not actually burning anything. There's nothing being combusted, so smoking doesn't make sense. Second, the intent was always to create an exemption for retail vapor stores, just like we do for retail tobacco stores. We allow people to smoke in those stores, because if you walk into a tobacco store, you walk into a vape store, you know what you're getting yourself into. So felt that exception should be there, but we were asked to make that a little bit more clear. They're not retail tobacco stores. They don't sell tobacco. They sell ends or vape devices. So we created a separate definition for retail vapor stores and again, just carve them out the same way that we do retail tobacco stores. And then as I was going through it, one of the things I noticed when we talk about how far you have to stand away from the entrances, we really only mentioned vapor, and I know when we discussed it at safety committee, we also talked about it more as an aerosol, and so just to be clear, we're talking about whatever the byproduct is, whatever you want to call the byproduct, if it's vapor or aerosol. I didn't want to get into that, so I just included both. But substantively, I'll just make it clear, we're not changing anything in terms of where you can use these devices. The intent is to keep that the same. Really, all that we're trying to change is the clarity with which that we describe what we're actually regulating.
Mr. Lang's amendments are in red in your packet. If you have one, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Labutus. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Mr. Rath.
I just have one question. On the third page, under letter J, it says a retail vapor store means a retail store used primarily for the sale of electronic nicotine delivery systems, yada, yada, yada. My question is the term primarily. So is that a legally defining term? Is primarily 51% of sales through vapor or vape for vends or whatever it is you called it? Or how do we define primarily? I mean, I don't want to see a store say, okay, we've got vends over here, so now even though we're doing all of this over here, you could address that, please.
Yeah, so I guess I'll say the intent was to keep the same definition. If you look, the item J, and I guess we may need to fix the numbering here, but retail tobacco store means a retail store primarily used for the sale of smoking materials. So it's meant to be the same way we define whether or not you're primarily a tobacco store. Wanted to keep the exact same words in place as to how we look at the vape stores.
For the law director, legally, are we okay with that?
I have no problem with that.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Autumn, please call the roll and vote on the amendment.
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
Mr. Koss.
Yes.
Mr. Fennell?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
And Mr. Labutus?
Yes.
1822 has been amended to 1822A. Is there any discussion on 1822A before we vote? Seeing none, Autumn, please call the roll and vote.
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
Mr. Koss.
Yes.
Mr. Fennell?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
And Mr. Labutus?
Yes.
1822A passes 10-0. Now we move on to ordinances on the first reading, 18-23.
Ordinance 18-23 by Mr. Rath, Mr. Koss, Mr. Marmee, an ordinance changing the zoning classification of certain real property generally described as 451 Van Tassel Avenue, City of Newark, Licking County, Ohio, from that of medium-intensity business zoning district to general business zoning district.
18-23 will be referred to the Planning Commission. Next, we have 18-24.
Ordinance 18-24 by Mr. Rath, Mr. Koss, Mr. Marmee, an ordinance approving the editing and inclusion of certain ordinances and resolutions as part of the various component codes of the codified ordinances, providing for the adoption of new matter in the updated and revised codified ordinances, repealing ordinances and resolutions in conflict therewith, and declaring an emergency.
18-24 is on the first reading, but it is an emergency. What is your wish?
Mr. President,
Mr. Rath?
I'd like to make a motion to adopt 18-24.
Second. Motion by Mr. Rath, second by Mr. Frazier. Is there any discussion on 18-24?
Mr. President,
Mr. Rath?
this is basically clerical clarification on the state level. We have an emergency clause on it to meet a publishing deadline.
Thank you, Mr. Rath. Anyone else? Autumn, please call the roll and vote.
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
Mr. Koss.
Yes.
Mr. Fennell?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
And Mr. Labutus?
Yes.
18-24 passes 10-0. Next on the first reading, we have 18-25.
Resolution 18, ordinance number 18-25 by Mr. Koss, Mr. Marmee, Mr. Rath, an ordinance amending Chapter 218 of the codified ordinances of the City of Newark, Ohio regarding mandatory ethics training for certain elected and appointed officials.
18-25 will be held to our next council meeting. Next, resolutions on the second reading, 18-57.
Resolution 18-57 by Mr. Marmee, Mr. Cos, Mr. Rath, Mr. Frazier, a resolution authorizing the mayor of the city of Newark to enter into a community development block grant funded subrecipient agreement with the hereinafter named organizations to carry out activities included within Newark's fiscal year 2018 Community Development Block Grant 1-Year Action Plan.
You've heard the second reading of 18-57. What is your wish?
Mr. President.
Mr. Marmee.
I make a motion to adopt Resolution 18-57.
Motion by Mr. Marmee.
Second.
Second by Mr. Frazier. Is there any discussion on 18-57? Seeing none, Autumn, please call the roll vote.
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
Mr. Cos?
Yes.
Mr. Fennell?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
And Mr. Labutus?
Yes.
18-57 passes 10-0. Next, we have 18-61.
Resolution 18-61 by Mr. Marmee, Mr. Cos, Mr. Rath, and Mr. Frazier, a resolution appropriating monies for the current expenses of the municipal corporation.
You've heard the second reading of 18-61. What is your wish?
Mr. President.
Mr. Marmee.
Make a motion to adopt Resolution 18-61.
Motion by Mr. Marmee, second by Mr. Cost. Is there any discussion on 18-61? Seeing none, Autumn, please call the roll vote.
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
Mr. Cos?
Yes.
Mr. Fennell?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
And Mr. Labutus?
Yes.
18-61 passes 10-0. And finally, on the second reading, we have 18-62.
Resolution 18-62 by Mr. Rath, Mr. Cos, Mr. Marmee, Mr. Frazier, a resolution approving and ratifying an updated solid waste management plan.
You've heard the second reading of 18-62. What is your wish?
Mr. President,
Mr. Rath.
I make a motion to adopt 18-62.
Motion by Mr. Rath.
Second.
Second by Mr. Frazier. Is there any discussion on 18-62? Seeing none, Autumn, please call the roll vote.
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
Mr. Cos?
Yes.
Mr. Fennell?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
And Mr. Labutus?
Yes.
18-62 passes 10-0. And finally, we move on to resolutions on the first reading. 18-63.
Resolution 18-63 by Mr. Marmee, Mr. Cos, Mr. Rath, a resolution appropriating monies for the current expenses of municipal corporation.
18-63. Mr. Marmee.
I make a motion to waive the 2-day reading rule on Resolution 18-63.
Motion to waive the 2-day reading rule by Mr. Marmee, second by Mr. Cost. Mr. Marmee.
Thank you, Mr. President. These are dealing with payouts, and we always need to expedite those to get their funds to the appropriate people as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Marmee. Autumn, please call the roll to waive the 2-day reading rule.
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
Mr. Cos?
Yes.
Mr. Fennell?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
And Mr. Labutus?
Yes.
The 2-day reading rule has been waived. Mr. Marmee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Make a motion to adopt Resolution 18-63.
Motion by Mr. Marmee, second by Mr. Cost. Is there any other discussion on 18-63? Seeing none, Autumn, please call the roll vote.
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
Mr. Cos?
Yes.
Mr. Fennell?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
And Mr. Labutus?
Yes.
18-63 is passed 10-0. Now, on the first reading, we have 18-64.
Resolution 18-64 by Mr. Marmee, Mr. Cos, Mr. Rath, a resolution authorizing and directing the mayor of the city of Newark to prepare and submit applications to the Ohio Department of Environmental Protection Agency for fiscal year 2018 Diesel Mitigation Trust Fund Program for equipment replacement, repower, retrofit, and anti-idle.
18-64.
Mr. President,
Mr. Marmee.
I make a motion to waive the 2-day reading rule on Resolution 18-64.
Second. Motion to waive the 2-day reading rule by Mr. Marmee, second by Mr. Frazier. Mr. Marmee.
Thank you, Mr. President. In order to meet the deadline for this, it has to be waived so that we can submit it in time.
Thank you, Mr. Marmee. Autumn, please call the roll to waive the 2-day reading rule.
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
Mr. Cos?
Yes.
Mr. Fennell?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
And Mr. Labutus?
Yes.
2-day reading rule has been waived. Mr. Marmee.
Thank you, Mr. President. Make a motion to adopt Resolution 18-64. Second.
Motion by Mr. Marmee, second by Mr. Frazier. Is there any other discussion on 18-64? Seeing none, I'll please call the roll vote.
Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Mr. Marmee?
Yes.
Mr. Rath?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Bub?
Yes.
Mr. Cost?
Yes.
Mr. Fennell?
Yes.
Mr. Frazier?
Yes.
Ms. Hall?
Yes.
And Mr. Labutus?
Yes.
18-64 passes 10-0. Next on the first reading, we have 18-65.
Resolution 18-65 by Mr. Marmee, Mr. Cost, Mr. Rath, a resolution appropriating monies for the current expenses of the municipal corporation.
18-65 is on the first reading. It will be held for 2 weeks to our next council meeting. Next, we have 18-66.
Resolution 18-66 by Mr. Marmee, Mr. Cost, Mr. Rath, a resolution authorizing for the city of Newark to pick up the statutorily required contribution to the Ohio Public Employees Retirement System for the employees of the city of Newark, for the employees of the city pursuant to Internal Revenue Code sections 414H2.
That was easy for you to read.
Yeah.
You've heard 18-66 will be held for 2 weeks for the next reading. And finally, tonight we have 18-67.
Resolution 18-67 by Mr. Rath, Mr. Cost, Mr. Marmee, a resolution authorizing the conveyance of certain real property now owned by the city of Newark, Ohio, to Newark Development Partners as its agent for industrial, commercial, distribution, and research development.
And 18-67 will be held for 2 weeks to our next meeting. And that concludes our legislation tonight. Thank you so much for your patience and indulgence. Next, we have comments from citizens. This is our second opportunity for citizens' comments. Again, it's the same rules apply. If you'll raise your hand so I know who wants to speak. I'll ask you to come up, give your name and address for the record. Again, this is not a debate with council. This is just your opportunity to speak. Yes, sir.
My name is Dan Kent. I live at 515 Sherwood Downs Road South. I just want to extend a little bit more on what she said about transportation. I've been living in Newark 22 years. I came here, I was walking, I walked to work and everything, University of Newark and all that for over five and a half years. Got my license and everything, came through the Spencer House. So I understand what the people are dealing with on walking and inadequate transportation. But my question is to y'all gentlemen and ladies, what way is there for y'all as individuals, as well as been on the council, to generate funds or generate some type of transportation for the individuals here in Newark and the surrounding areas, Heath and Granville and everything like that? It's sad here. I have lost quite a few friends here that used to live here. They left because of inadequate transportation. And, it's sad. This city is real sad. Y'all on the council, y'all don't see it actually. Y'all might say you do, but y'all don't actually be down in the trenches and actually feel the pain, feel the people up there going through this and that, unless you down there and wallowing in the mud. I have wallowed in the mud. I'm getting emotional now because I know what the pain is. It's frustrating, very. I had a stroke in 2010. That's the reason I can't work. I can't drive at night. It's getting dark. I got special glasses on. And, if I can't drive, I got to get a cab or wait on somebody to come pick me up. But in Columbus, something like that happened, I could jump on the bus and get home. You don't have it here. And it's scary. I've seen people walk up and down the streets today, coming from Mount Vernon. Gentleman, I picked him up, brought him in. I went all the way to Vanetta, and I passed him on the way, then turned around. He's still walking. I just brought him on in. He said he walked from Mount Vernon. Started at 4 o'clock this morning. Wow. And, it's sad. And It's so depressing for this city. This is a good city. I like it. I really do. Some good people here. I like the environment and everything. That's on one side. On the other side, it's ugly. It's ugly in the sense of inadequate transportation, inadequate for a person to go get on the bus and just take a ride, enjoy the scene. It's sad, and kids, they like getting can't drive. They want to get somewhere. They get on the bus and go. Can't do it here. Can't do it. And it's a good city. Like I said, it's a very good city. I like it. That's the reason I'm staying here. And been here 22 years, and I ain't gonna go nowhere. But y'all have to do something. Really do. Y'all have to do something. I understand. I read y'all's minutes for the year. Y'all haven't brought up nothing about transportation. I read through the whole thing. No transportation at all. You don't even comment on it. That's sad. That tells me, as an individual, that y'all don't care. Maybe y'all do, but on my end, I see that y'all don't care. That's all I got to say.
Thank you, Dan. Just a comment, Licking County has taken over the transportation that used to be here in the city of Newark, and they handle the transportation for the county, whether that's good or bad. It's just, we used to have separate transportation, and then it got merged into the county. So, come on, man. Come on. But that's not here nor there, that's just a comment. Ma'am?
Hi, Rochelle Volan-Smith at 237 Violet Court. I would like to thank the two very eloquent speakers on the transportation issue for bringing up some well-needed comments on it, and I want to support that in saying that I think the lack of transportation in the city is going to be its limitation in terms of the future. I know there's a goal to make this for the city to really, really grow and in terms of jobs and that sort of thing, and I think the lack of transportation is going to substantially limit its growth. I see all the time families not in a neighborhood or neighborhoods that are not terribly walkable, where there are no sidewalks, even to the playgrounds, where people are walking miles and miles to go to the grocery store. I see people in wheelchairs in the middle of the street because because the sidewalks again are non-existent and they don't have another alternative and they can't afford transportation. And I think something has to give. I'd like to encourage you to think more about that issue. Thank you.
Anyone else? Anyone from the administration? Mr. Motter.
Thank you. Just to address the issue of transportation and mobility, I would like you to know that there is a group here in town working on it. We just recently completed a program called Vision 2028. It's a long-range plan for the city of Newark. There are what we call 7 pillars or 7 areas that we have a concentration that we want to work on, and one of those is mobility and transportation. So there is a group here in town very diligently working on that to try to improve the situation.
Can I ask, how do we find out?
No.
Sorry.
I'll be glad to talk with you afterwards.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Motter. Anyone else from the city? Law Director Sassen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll pass.
Thank you, Director Sassen. Mayor Hall.
I used my time at the beginning for proclamations, so I'll pass. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Lang.
So first, I'd just like to thank my colleagues for working with me and indulging me there to pass the amended 1822. It was unfortunate the gentleman who contacted me from the business that was having the issue, we couldn't get this done in time, and their business has since closed in large part due to the issue that I think we've solved tonight, and hopefully we've fixed that for other business owners and people around the city. But, I think we've done a good service to our community in treating vaping the same way that we treat smoking, and reduced what I would think is a public nuisance and potential hazard. But I'm also glad that we could get it right. I was glad we could work with the trade association to get the language right, so that we're not unduly prejudicing any of the businesses that are operating in our city. I'd also like to thank the service department, fixing a couple issues, one on Krebs Court. The engineering department answered some questions for me on Myers Drive, and our inspector for getting after some inspection issues that I've been asking him about, so I appreciate it from the service department. I'd also like to thank the Newark Police Department, specifically Officer Derek Beach. On Londondale, we had a very sad story that many of you may have seen on Facebook. A young dog ran out into the street and was hit by an SUV that didn't stop, that was traveling about double the speed limit. So the MPD really got on top of that, and Officer Beach was out there running speed for us, and I think we're going to get the speed trailer out there. And I guess I'd just like to remind everybody, as kids are going back to school and you're driving down residential streets, take your time, obey the speed limits. I think we're all guilty of rushing from time to time. Also wanted to congratulate Mayor Hall, Director Rhodes, the Licking County Foundation, everybody else that put all the effort into getting the 21st Street Bike Park open. I was really pleased to see that open. I think that's going to be a great addition to our community. And then I wanted to remind everyone there's a session being hosted by the Licking County Foundation at the library. It's called the Better Angels Workshop, and it's all about how to work with each other, how to talk to people on the other side of the political divide. I think there's a lot that is a very needed thing in our community. That's going to be at the Licking County Library Tuesday, August 28th from 2:30 to 5. You can register for that on the Licking County Foundation website. I think the seating's limited, so it is free, but you can register on their website. And with that, I'll pass.
Thank you, Mr. Lang. Mr. Marmee.
Thank you, Mr. President. I need to call a Finance Committee meeting. I also just want to talk a little bit about the public transit, and I hear individuals saying that we aren't addressing it here in Newark. A little bit of history: we did have our own transit department here in Newark. Funds kept, even the grant funding and everything continuously was decreased. They kept changing the rules of what we could and couldn't do. And so therefore, the only alternative we really had was to combine services with the county, because we had to pull those resources of dollars together, so then we weren't each trying to do the same thing with a lot less money. When we made that decision, now it is up to the county to do that. It is their responsibility to try to come up with feasible alternatives as far as the different transportation, as far as what can be done. I, for one, would be in support of any kind of proposal that they have. If they need additional funding for something, it's never going to be something we can say we're never going to consider. But the other thing is that the city of Newark cannot fund for the entire county, so everybody would have to pitch in their fair share and their portion of it. There are a lot of transits departments in counties that are working very efficiently, and the main reason why is they do go outside those bounds. They make transports from their county 45, 50 miles away for doctor's visits. They have to be coordinated, but they do that. But it has to be very organized. It has to be led by somebody who's compassionate about it, and I have seen it work. But that's going to have to be done at the county level. And, again, the city of Newark, I don't think there's anybody up here that would not look at any kind of proposal where they're going to make the program better. And, we agree there's transportation issues that need to be addressed. We would love to address them. It is not within our budget to do that, and not only that, we're overstepping our bounds a little bit because our transit department is with the county. So
Just wanted to kind of state that, and with that, I'll pass.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Mr. Rath?
Thank you. Just want to make an announcement that the Newark City Police Department is announcing a new Citizens Academy starting October 3rd. I know Mr. Lang is registered for it, is volunteered to be tased. I'm looking forward to seeing that. I also heard he volunteered me to be taken down by a canine. I don't know if they do that or not, but if you're interested in seeing something like that, it starts October 3rd. It's 6 weeks, 3 hours on a Wednesday, on 6 consecutive Wednesdays. Doesn't cost you a dime, and you get to learn an awful lot about how our phenomenal police department works. So if you want to learn more about the police department and how everything inside works, it's going to be a great program. I've talked to a lot of people that have already gone through it, and it was definitely, I haven't talked to anybody that didn't say it wasn't worth their time. So with that, I'll call a service committee meeting and I'll pass.
Thank you, Mr. Rath. Mr. Blake?
Thank you, Mr. President. I went through that program last year, Councilman Rath, and just let me know the night that the canine unit's going to attack you. I'd like to see that. Yes, I would. But I do want to give out some kudos. I do think the legislation sponsored by Councilman Lang was very good, and thank you for working with Charlotte Hickox on that. Charlotte and I were staffers in the legislature 10 years ago, 12 years ago. So she's a very knowledgeable person, so thank you for working with her on that. There's some birthdays, and so Councilman Fennell had a birthday yesterday, so I want to wish him a happy birthday. My kudos to you for getting through another year, and the best wishes for another year. And then the IFF had a 100-year continuous affiliation birthday, and so 100 years to our local 109 union, so happy birthday there. And then as far as community events, as a member of Kiwanis, I'd be reluctant not to mention to council that we have a fish fry on September 6th, Thursday, September 6th, and it starts at 4:30, and then the social hours at 4:30 and the dinner's at 5:30. And so if you'd like a ticket to the fish fry, feel free to see me after the meeting or any time up to that point. I'll be happy to get you a ticket to the Kiwanis Fish Fry, which helps the Camp O'Bannon. With regard to the people that spoke tonight regarding the transportation issue, I think that each of us as elected officials have some authority with regards to being advocates. We all know financial budget issues and things, so I think just showing up to meetings is important. I think being an advocate for people is important. So while we may not have ways financially to be supportive, I think we can be advocating for our people and attending those meetings. I know that you have hosted a few meetings with board members from the county transit board, aware of the meetings that Director Mauder had mentioned. So I think sometimes just our presence and being there makes a difference. And so I would encourage members of council and people sitting around the dais to attend, to get involved. I mean, I think just our presence really brings some influence as to, hey, this is a priority, this is a need. And so showing up really does make a big difference. So while we continue that discussion, I just want to share with council that, a week ago when I got back from vacation, a long-time childhood friend of mine had contacted me, and I hadn't talked to him in several years, but he lived out on Fleet Avenue, and he contacted me, and he's 37 years old, and he's homeless. He's living in a tent in the woods. And this homelessness issue, I think, also relates to transportation. I mean, just the poverty that's happening. And so it's something that we need more discussion. I mean, I appreciate your comments in saying you read through our minutes and you had no public conversation related to poverty, related to transportation, related to homelessness. This is something that is happening in our city, and we have a beautiful downtown. We have beautiful things happening in our community, and I love Newark just as much as you made your comments as you do. But we do have some barriers that need to be challenged and need to be coordinated, and we need to come in partnership with city, community, business, nonprofit, all these entities. I really believe that when we have a focus and a goal and we bring everyone together and rally, that's when we can really make great things happen. And so, I appreciate all the comments that were said tonight, and we look forward to continuing that discussion, public discussion, that things are in our public record. So thank you for speaking tonight. So with that, I'll yield.
Thank you, Mr. Blake. Mr. Buck?
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a few items this evening. Just wanted to welcome Community Bank to the city of Newark. It's be really nice up on 21st Street. Welcome Town's Family Billiards on 11th Street. Did a nice job refurbishing that building, and remind everyone of the Ox Roast this Saturday at the Manor Court. And with that, I'll pass.
Thank you, Mr. Rupp. Mr. Cost.
I'd like to congratulate Mr. Martin and the folks that were involved with the South Side cleanup. Lots of good things have happened there, very positive. I also want to thank the folks who come in to discuss transportation. It is a major concern. For all the progress that I'm very proud of that we've made downtown, transportation is still an issue that we need to be looking at, along with safe, affordable housing, and still the issue of having a downtown grocery store. For me, those are things that are still very important. As Councilman Blake said, the poverty and homelessness issue is very much related to those things. So it's something we very much want to continue a discussion of. Thank you. I'll pass.
Thank you, Mr. Cost. Mr. Fennell.
I'd also like to thank everyone who came and spoke about public transportation tonight. I think it's easy for those of us who have easy access to transportation to forget the struggles that people have who don't have access to that type of privilege. And while it is not something that is directly within our purview, I believe that we can advocate and be stronger advocates for better public transportation here in Newark. And you coming and speaking tonight, what that does is that it puts it in front of us and it reminds us of things that are important and things that can make our city better. So thank you for coming and speaking tonight. I think I would be in big trouble if I didn't thank my mom for coming out tonight as well.
Yes, so you have a guest tonight, right?
I have a guest this evening, Shelley Woodruff, my mom. I definitely would not be having a 36th birthday without her, so thank you.
Good call.
With that, I'll pass.
Thank you, Mr. Fennell. Well, Mr. Frazier.
Happy 36th birthday, Mom. Congratulations. I want to congratulate Owens Corning on their development as well. They have an addition that they're planning to build as well. Floyd Park, the legislation, John, was great tonight, and I want to congratulate the administration on the Community Development Block Grant, the Sewer Management Plan, and the legislation that's on the docket today. Carolyn, great work, continue to advocate and continue to organize. And so I think the real issue that we have is how do we better utilize the system that we have to make it more efficient? How do we increase ridership and decrease cost across the board? And how do we leverage public lands and public stops in order to better facilitate transportation in the city of Newark? And so I think that advocating is one thing and finding solutions is another thing. And so I want to get back involved with your group to work as a bridge to the transit board in order to help facilitate that change that we want to see. And I think that if you look at the dynamics that we have in place, we can use a flex route transportation, better logistics in order to take that $4 million a year investment that we have approximately in transportation through the county and through state grants in order to build a more efficient and lower cost system. It will not, I don't see us really being able to do a fixed route transportation, but the ability to use a flex route transportation where we can have more on-day servicing, centralized locations, centralized drop-offs for employers and hospital visits is what's critical. One of the number one routes that the Lincoln County Transit does is for dialysis. They know it, and everybody looks at their ridership and they see it as well. So how do we get people from the east end, the south end, the north end, and the west end to the hospital to do dialysis treatment and back home? There's got to be a way to solve it. I think that a lot of mapping, logistics, signage, and dispatching should really get us there. And so, Carolyn, thank you. Mr. Hunt, or Mr. Kent, thank you again for coming in. And with that, I'll yield.
Thank you, Mr. Frazier. Ms. Hall.
Yes, thank you. I too want to address the transportation. People can't get to jobs. LCAP is good about getting folks to medical appointments and getting them back again. However, that takes time and planning and can be difficult for some. I have a small class on Friday at Heritage Hall, and seniors are great. A lot of classes out there. I get calls all the time. I'd really like to take your class. How do I get there? And it's really kind of therapy. It's a lot of fun. I don't know what to tell them. They can't afford a cab there and a cab back again. It's not medical, of course. but I think it would be good for a lot of seniors to come out and take advantage of the things going on at Heritage Hall. They just can't get there. So I'm hoping that we can figure something out that'll help the citizens of Newark. So thank you. With that, I'll pass.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. And Mr. Labutus.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just a couple of things. I'd like to echo Mr. Lang and Mr. Frazier's comments on the Flory Park bike path. There on my 21st Street. It was a great opening. A lot of great people there that morning to see that, and it's a great improvement. So congratulations on that. And also congratulations to Sergeant Robert Phillips on his promotion within the police department to sergeant status. And then congratulations and thank you to Captain Ron Walsh for 41 years of service to Newark Fire Department. He just retired this past week, so congratulations to him. With that, I will pass.
Thank you, Mr. Labutus. Thank everyone for coming tonight. Just a couple odds and ends. City Hall will be closed on September 3rd, which is 2 weeks from tonight for Labor Day. So our next council and full committee meetings will be Tuesday, September 4th. Committees will start at 5:45. Our council meeting will start promptly at 7 o'clock. With that, is there a motion to adjourn? Motion by Mr. Scott, second by Mr. Fraser. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Same sign. We're adjourned. Thank you for coming.